Okay, we're on the half hour, so I think we can get started. Welcome, everybody. My name's John Bales. I'm president of the International Council for Coaching Excellence, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you here today for the ICCE Connect webinar. We hope you're all remaining safe and still managing to be productive in various areas of coaching and coaching development. But I think we all recognize the challenges we're facing, and we're really pleased today to have the opportunity to talk with two outstanding coaches who are facing the challenge of preparing for the Tokyo Olympics under these very challenging conditions. I'll turn it over to Cam Kiosoglis to introduce the program. Cam.
Thanks, JB, and as we say, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody around the world. With what is hard to believe, 273 days to the Tokyo Olympics. Thrilled to be able to share with you some insights from around the world of what we're all going through, the highs and lows, some of the challenges that we're all facing in prep for the Tokyo Olympics, some of the lessons learned, and some of the ways we're all trying to move forward. I'm going to hand it over in a moment to my dear friend John Gudeland from Norway to talk a little bit about some of the examples from our guest speakers, and specifically, really interested in anyone's insights, questions as we go along. We'll have a couple of presentations, and then we'll hand it over to a larger conversation that really stems with how we all stay motivated during these incredibly challenging times. And particularly this very unusual fifth year, the extra year of the Olympic cycle that's certainly helping motivate younger athletes, but certainly challenging some of our older athletes. So, John, I'll hand it over to you to introduce Cora, and then we'll hear from Clarissa from USA Wrestling. So over to you.
Thank you, Cam. Hello, everybody. It's a great pleasure here now to be able to introduce Kåre Mohl. He's a beach volleyball coaching legend, not only in Norway but internationally, being on the grid here for over 30 years now, and he's at the moment leading the Norwegian campaign in beach volleyball, the Beach Volleyball Vikings, towards the Olympics, and bringing the Norwegian beach volleyball teams up to the #1 spot now for 3 years running. It's impressive from a small nation, which usually is more known for their results in winter sports. But this usually is an arena dominated by the Americans and the Brazilians. So having a Norwegian coach and a Norwegian team dominating is quite unique. So we're really interesting to share and listen to some of the things that he and his team has been doing. And I think another thing unique about Kåre and his team is that Kåre always had a great passion, not only for the high performance, but also for the kids and the kids volley. And I don't know, maybe it's the combination of being an expert both with the kids volley and the high performance that makes him so successful, both with the kids and also with the high performance. So without further introduction, Kåre, I'll leave the floor to you, and to everybody else, please enjoy.
Thank you, John, or Jon in Norwegian. Hello to everybody out there. I'm grateful to say something about this. For us coaches, it is a big challenge to lose control. This is a highlight from one of our winning events, but we have a structured day we have a program 250 days a year. The schedule is really busy, and then suddenly it's actually no control of what we're doing. And that's a big challenge for us coaches and especially for us control freaks. We like to have control of the situation, what's happening. So for me also, this is a big challenge. And for the players, it's like they are losing the most important thing in the sport, and that's to compete, because they really love to compete, and that's the drive in their career. It's actually not to practice and to warm up and to it is to compete, and the competition factor, we lost that. And for us also, we measure not time in our performance. We measure where we stand towards our opponents. Are we still doing our work good enough? And then we measure it when we play tournaments. We're still number one in the world, but this is really a situation that challenge the control over the situation. You can just go on to the next slide. You can also move on to the next slide, Cam. I say this is a really boring slide. A lot of text, no picture, and this is like practicing without a goal. Like our competition goal. We lose our competition goal. And this is when we as coaches, we find new goals. We have thousands of things we want to practice. We can do these details better, and we can do technical things. We can work on processes. We actually love this situation to dig into details we really can practice. For us, it was really important to put something to the table for the athletes, that we challenge them in how can we keep the drive. We are losing those competitions. How can we keep the drive in our practice? How can we keep the motivation? In this situation, we have no scientific work. Every coach likes the scientific work. We have to do this and this because this gives us the result we need. But nobody has done some scientific in the situation we are now, with no motivation factor in our practice. So for us, it was important to discuss really close with the coaching staff and also the athletes. What is your motivation? How can we figure out some things to keep you motivated? And it was also important for me to have in focus that I don't want to take 1 year of their career, but I wanted to make sure that this stop extend their career. We have pretty young players, and they are highly motivated, but they are of course most motivated for the competitions. So for us, it was important to really discuss it closely with the athletes and to find a way we could adjust things, because we really had to adjust things. Yeah, and I think maybe this situation is different also from older people. They are in the end of the career, younger players. Some players are more orientated to processes in practicing. Some players, like the best players I have 2 teams, but the best team, they practice because they just love to compete, and So there is a different motivation also within the group, and we are a team sport, but we have 2 players, and we have two teams practicing together, so we are 4 players. So we are a small group actually. So for us, it was really important to know what the players know, and to ask them things. So I want to take you through some things what worked for us, and maybe this also gives some ideas in how to handle this. But some things worked for us, and we did some adjustments. So if you can flip to the next slide, Karen. We basically did 2 main things, and that we had to adjust our focus in practice. And with this, I can say something what we did, and that is we had to create more kind of competition situations in practice. We had to bring in some younger players also to create competitions within the group, and we made kind of competitions that the losers are making food for the winners, and so we tried to create the competition situations that gives the energy to work hard in practice. The most boring part in the practice is the warming up. So we always created some new game situations in warming up to the practice. And then we put up some really clear goals in what we should be better in the game. We have been working on a serve for a long time, but the serve part was really highlighted in our practice, so that we had really, and then maintain the other things, but we had a really structured goal in serving, and a lot of practices were focused on this, and not a lot of things, but really some focused things. The second main thing we did was to change environment. We had kind of practice rhythm that we had 1 week together, where we worked hard with the ball handling and ball skills and these kind of things. And when you are 1 week together, you get a bit bored of each other, and then we have 1 week off. So to keep the drive in practice, we had 1 week on and 1 week off that we didn't see each other, because we live in different parts of Norway. And then everybody went home, and we had physical training when we are home, and for ourselves. So that was basically what we did in changing environment. We also had in different players, so that some other players came into the group with some different energy. We had some younger players which always are motivated and can give energy to the group. We had some other coaches in to highlight some things, just to switch some of the environment within our group. And for us, this was a really good thing, than to stay a small group with 4, 5, 6 people and always do the same things to shift the environment. We also tried to shift the places we practice, so that we didn't went to the same place, the same gym, that we shifted environment, just to create energy in shifting environments. this worked. We have been through this and have had an evaluation of this, and everybody's really happy with the way we did. There are always some adjustment, but this was a good thing to stay motivated through the summer. I have some input for coaches, what we as coaches had focus on. So if you flip to the next slide, Cam. It was and tip for the coaches. I think it's important to find a balance in your training group, because I have a specific training group, but involve the training group really closely. And also, I guess there are different needs in the training group. Some are in the end of the career. If you have a team with younger players and older players, there are always different needs within a group. And it's not only important for me as a coach to listen to them, but also the other players have to listen to each other, what the different needs are, because then it's much easier to respect that I need to stay with my family more. But I'm young and I'm motivated. I just want to practice more. So it's possible for you to practice more. So you have to find a balance in your training group, and everybody has to know different needs in this group. I think it's important for us as coaches also to breathe and relax, and to realize that sport is not the most important thing in life, and also to communicate this. It's if virus doesn't know the sport or our schedule or time limits, it is something we have to face, and then we have to breathe and relax with this. I think we as coaches, we always find also developing things for our staff, for the athletes. So why don't we find some developing tasks for ourselves and practice on that? And for me, it was also important to find things that make me energized, and to work out a bit. I lost some weight and I did more workout than I've done in many years. And I also catched up with some lost family time. So that's about living. And we had some busy years, so it was also to breathe and relax a bit in this period. You can flip to the next, Cam. For the athletes, I say to my son is one of them. It's and he said also to me, it was kind of it was really stressful in the start, but it was also kind of good to come out of the ego bubble that sport is, and the ego bubble for his tournaments, and the how to perform in tournaments, and the only discussion of what can we do to make you better, and blah blah blah. So to relax and come out of the ego bubble was also good for him. It's and I think that's also important for the athletes to think what life is about, and be thankful for the sport when they can come back again. So for them also to breathe and relax, and also do some other things is a good thing. You can flip to the next, Cam. My players, they also, we practice of course, but we had some time off, and they made a pretty busy schedule as well this summer. They tried to explore some nature. They did some road trips. They find some locations. They did promotion of a sport in Norway. They organized or camps and brought in a lot of kids, and this gave them also energy to be athletes. They like to promote their sport to kids. So for them, this was not a must-do thing, but it gave them energy. So to create some alternative activity, and to let them do this was a good thing for us. And on one of the road trips we had in the north of Norway, we did a spectacular stunt. So and it's also allowed to be a bit crazy. We love sport and we love to challenge each other. So we did a crazy stunt in the end here. So you can show the last one. What I meant with be a bit crazy.
Yeah, so if that doesn't get your heart pumping, check your pulse. You might not be alive. So
That's more than a bit crazy.
talk about creativity.
It's crazy, but you have to do something. It's just live life also and do something and do what you want to do and follow some of the crazy paths. I hope you have some questions for me in this, and that we can discuss something of this. But this is some of our briefly experiences with the situations we have been in.
Very good, Cora. Thank you very much, and we'll come back to questions in a little bit. I'd love to hand it over now to Clarissa, who's based in Colorado Springs, and I first heard about Clarissa at the 2012 Olympics when one of our national team athletes at the Olympics decided to pick on a 48 kilo a wrestler from the US, and that I come to find out many years later that was Clarissa, and she embarrassed one of our national team athletes, put him on the ground, and he will never pick on anyone that's 4'11" and 48 pounds, 48 kilos again. So Clarissa, over to you. Tell us what's going on in Colorado Springs and how you guys are managing all things pandemic and apparently preparations for the Olympic Games.
Oh, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're at. There's within USA Wrestling. So I currently coach the women's team. I'm one of the national team assistant coaches, and here in Colorado Springs, things are different from across the nation of the US because everyone has different situations and guidelines. Like during the or we're still in the pandemic, but during the whole quarantine process, different states were shut down or had different regulations across the board, right? Everything was like, follow your local guidelines. But like for the most part, our athletes have faced very similar situations with people across the world. So, you know, we had to get creative to keep our athletes engaged, whether it was Zoom workouts, which was really hard because wrestling is a contact sport. And if they're telling us to be 6 feet apart, it's really hard for our athletes to find those partners during the times where they had to be locked in their homes. But as we move forward to today, there's, still some challenges, but even though things have been opening up, like currently today, we are almost back to normal training schedules, I would say, although, there are certain limitations and challenges that come along with that for the safety of everyone. We've navigated our way back to train at the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Training Center, which is really good. It was quite a process, and it still is. So that way we can make sure that everyone's healthy and safe. So some things that we come across is if anyone chooses to leave the state, say go home or go to a competition, which at our senior level, we ended up having our first competition a couple weeks ago, which was, bittersweet. It was it was a little bit nervous and very exciting, wasn't really sure how things were gonna go, but I think it ended up being a great event that they put together to remain safe. What the Olympic Training Center is doing is if anyone travels, there's a quarantine period of a few days, and then they test 2 days with 24 hours apart. Day 4 and day 5, they test. And then the athletes are still quarantining until their results come back negative. And then I say athletes, but athletes, coaches, staff, everyone that is going on complex there. Like I said, it's different across the nation for our program. We have our top athletes all over the country. Some are on the East Coast, some are on the West Coast, and their situations are different. Some are testing every week where they're at, and some are actually in Canada, training in Canada, and it's hard for them to come in and out, so they've been primarily in Canada. So some updated news as far as where we are currently at, that goes along with these challenges for preparing for the Olympics is our international federation, United World Wrestling, has decided to go forward with having a world championships in Serbia in mid-December. And just recently, 2 days ago, USA Wrestling came out and made the decision saying that we won't send our athletes because, of the risk, that it is to go and travel and compete right now. So, mixed feelings from our athletes as far as that decision goes, but it also isn't a certain, it's during the times of a pandemic, anything can happen. In the sense of the World Championships still could get canceled. So I think it's those challenges are, Cara said, it's, having communication with the athletes, checking on them. A lot of during this whole time, it was a lot of, hey, where can we get better, right? We can't, even if we're limited on the amount of competition, which competition brings a lot of good feedback for the athletes to refine their craft, leading into the Olympics. This is where we gather a lot of information on what went well, what can we do better, and what will we do differently, kind of thing. So without having competition, it's really is zeroing in on technique, and getting healthier, right? If any of our athletes had injuries, even big, no matter how big or small their injuries, it's getting healthier and getting back to that premium state of competition. But the creativity, it comes into play without having competition, right? So what wrestling has been doing, they've been holding events dual meet style. So keeping a group smaller than a tournament. A tournament, you can have hundreds of athletes compete, and it's a little harder to create a bubble in the wrestling community as far as everyone's going to be having contact. And but if we can keep the competition like me versus Cam or something, and 6 other matches on top of that, then we have the ability to test everyone and make sure everything is run smoothly and safe. So we've had competition. So this picture you're looking at was just a couple weeks ago. We had our first senior national event in Iowa, and Iowa, not a lot of restrictions there. So we were able to have the event there. They said 50% capacity on spectators, but it was much less than that showed up. So on the next, so they did a really good job. If Cam just keeps going through these photos, you get an insight of how, masks obviously were required, temperature checks and whatnot before entering the competition, and symptom checking. But the competition floor was really well laid out, spaced out, and everyone in the stands were wearing masks. And if we go to the next one, I think they're in the warm-up area, I believe. It's athletes aren't wearing masks because they're competing, and they're not wearing masks when they're competing. So this was probably for me the most like, okay, if anything's gonna happen, it's gonna happen back here. But so pretty spaced out for the most part, which is I should have done a photo like pre-COVID, because usually warm-up areas are like compacted, everyone's on top of everyone. You have to watch out to make sure that people aren't like falling on each other, or like taking people down on top of each other. But here they did a good job of making sure they're spaced out. And then next, the referees all had shields, and the people, like, usually there's judges on the table, the scorekeepers and whatnot, they all have masks on too. So and coaches in the corner are having masks on too. So they, everyone did their part in making sure this event runs smoothly, And then next, Ken. Like I said, temperature checks upon the day of competition to enter the arena, and symptom checks. But also they sent out a 7-day post-competition symptom check and feedback. So, and then they'll send a 14-day one as well to everyone in attendance. And the data that we got was, or that the events team had got, was, I think they said 2 people reported that they had symptoms. I was just telling Cam this the other day, but like they sent out like 500, give or take 500 feedback forms to everyone in attendance, and less than half filled it out. So it's kind of one of those things that, everyone's trying to do the best they can, in gathering information and learning from how can we like move forward and have events again safely with the COVID. So, and then so like I was saying earlier, these are opportunities for competition. So this is an example of like kind of like the UFC style, right? You have a fight card, you have matchups, of top athletes or younger athletes. So this is ways that our athletes can get excited about competing. It might not be a full tournament where they're getting 4 or 5 matches in a day, but it's something that they can get excited to train for, something to compete and just kind of see where they're at, see what they're working on is being executed in a live competition. So some of the lessons that we've learned, during these obstacles are, obviously the ones that we feel are quite obvious, like controlling what we can control, taking care of what we can given the obstacles in front of us, right? Like we remind our athletes, hey, we're not the only one in this situation. We're all having these challenging times, and how to navigate to stay safe and healthy. So what can we work on that is in our control? Whether it's video watching or working on our like mental game, visualization. These are like might be things that are off the mat that we can be in control of. So, but also being creative, like during these times, it's during the challenges, like we are allowed to be creative and think outside of the box, and finding ways to make things happen, like Cara said, new games and whatnot. And for our athletes, I think it was a good way to connect our senior level athletes with our younger athletes, our developmental athletes. And they've had the opportunity to do Zoom workouts together, kind of be those leaders as senior athletes, and have conversations via Zoom, like this is awesome. I'm able to like communicate with each and every one of you across the world, and like pre-pandemic, this wasn't really something that I normally did, so these are awesome ways to find ways to communicate and be creative and stay in touch with people all across the world. And also doing it safely, right? So we can still hold, like, I guess, webinars or like conventions and, like virtually. So not the same as in person, but, we can still get the message across. So, so for our final stages in preparation for the 2021 Summer Olympics, we're still hoping to like get a couple international competitions in before the Summer Olympics. We don't know what that's going to look like, right? Everything is kind of like not planned, but in the sense we're making plan Bs, right? Hey, if we can't travel overseas to get a competition in, or then maybe, hey, we're thinking of ideas of, hey, maybe we'll bring the Canadians down, if they can travel, but let's bring the Canadians down. Let's have a training camp, keep it small and have a dual meet style competition. Maybe we invite people from Norway, like just small controlled groups rather than going to big competitions, just so that we can have, our athletes feel that sense of, competition from outside the US, because it gives a different feel, everyone has a different style in wrestling, and but the exciting part is, from what I heard, is like that because people would ask, do you really think that Tokyo Olympics is going to happen? Do you think they're going to cancel it at the last minute? And it was said that it was going to happen with or without coronavirus, right? So I heard that men's gymnastics is going to Tokyo, like a couple guys from the US. And I think that the Tokyo Organizing Committee is doing a test competition, by hosting an international competition. And it's a smaller competition than they're normally having, I guess. But it's a good message that they're trying to navigate through how to run it, safely. So like everyone is just trying to figure out how to run events safely here in the US. So but some things that like also is to be reminded of is your self-care. Like, what are we doing to take care of ourselves, right? Or even how are we helping our athletes take care of themselves as well, through the stress of, is it happening? Is it not happening? Here in the US, there's so many like issues that are going on currently on top of the pandemic, and whether it's finding themselves to go outside and go for a hike, finding what kind of gets their mind off of competing in wrestling, diving into a book or watching a Netflix show or whatnot. So it's kind of no different than Cara was saying, that is like, connecting with people and building on your relationships. So thank you, guys. That's what I have for today.
Excellent. Thank you, Clarissa. Thank you, Cara. It's really it's fascinating to me that there are so many parallels around the world, and particularly we'll hand over to some questions here. Cara, the first one is is just with the adjustments and changes. How have you been being mindful of injury and the risk of injury with particularly a change in, say, your warm up? How are you dealing with that one?
This is just an adjustment because we make smaller courts to stay healthy. It's you warm up in some way. So to warm up with a ball, one hand touches in a smaller area so that you don't have to run that much. You just have to be creative to not do the boring warm up things, and of course you can be creative in this. And I think we learn a lot in this process. So now and I think we will continue with this to warm up like this to small games, because it's also helping your coordination, which is good for us all the time, and change the rules in this so that they understand how to win the game and they find new rules and blah blah blah. So I think the injury situation is not a factor at all.
Yes, you definitely strike me as someone that's always innovating, and I don't think at any level anything with you is boring or monotonous or predictable. So that's one thing for sure. How about you, Clarissa, in terms of the injury piece and particularly with combat sports and the sort of the uncertainty and the lack of ability to predict what's going on? How have you guys been able to manage that injury piece?
Yeah, it really is on coming back slowly, right? So when we were able to work with our athletes like in person, it's, we didn't jump right into it, obviously, right? So it's just assessing where each athlete is, because every athlete trained a little bit differently. Some took a little bit more time off, some just hit the ground running and found ways to like stay like in cardiovascular shape. But yeah, so upon return, it was assessing each athlete and just gradually, because we knew that, okay, we could possibly have a competition in October. And if we were on the mat by June or July, I would say, then we just kind of eased into it. And then kind of, I would say, building up into that competition week, so we like any like periodization planning, that's what we used. And we are fortunate, no injuries, so I think actually for some athletes, gearing up for the Olympics, there was some that were injured, like coming in, going for 2020, and it allowed them to slow down and heal, like in the summer. So I think some athletes were grateful, that they had a little bit more time to like heal. But then there are some athletes that, were ready, and like, we wanted to compete this year kind of thing. So that's kind of how I look at it, is like, that was my big fear for that first competition, is injuries, because, if you're in the US and you're watching American football, NFL, that first week, boom, like football, players after players were getting injured. And, like that was a little bit in the back of my head, like, oh, I hope this first competition goes well, everyone's safe and healthy, but I think, people did a good job, like ramping up their training in a progression. So.
Great, thanks, Clarissa. Another question here is from Tony. If anybody found any mental health issues among the athletes or the coaching staff. Kåre, do you have any comments on that?
Maybe my mental health myself was the most because for me, it was I was really restless, and I started digging in the garden and do some crazy things. I started to phone former coaches to tell them how grateful I was to that they have brought me into the sport. So I did some crazy things, but the mental health for the players was. I know my son Anders also. He was in the start. He was really restless because he was used to travel, and so he needed time to be used to the new situation actually. But other players they were really calm and accepted the situation we were in. So, but I think it's a mental stress situation also because their income, because if they win tournaments, they earn money, and there is an income situation and all these kind of things. And we have to ask them about this. And our players are young, so they don't have houses and families and things like that. So they are in a pretty good situation. But I think that's different from any athlete. So maybe some struggle more in this. So, but in our situation, we didn't have any big issues.
Yeah, and motivation-wise, there was a European Championship, so which they was staged with all the same, a lot of the same implementation that Clarissa showed us. That was staged in Latvia, and that was also a good test that you succeeded with your measurements and your different ways of tasking this situation. Can you tell us a little bit about the European Championships, Kåre?
We had a European Championship, and in the world now we have the leading teams are from Europe. So then we suddenly have a test. How have we done this summer? And I asked other coaches how they have practiced. Some countries they have had really had a lot of practice, and some players I could see a kind of because when I talk to coaches, I talk to athletes, and when you see their eyes, you can see if they are energized or not. And I can see my players; they are really energized when they go into a tournament, and that's my focus also. To play a ball game, you need to be focused and you need to be energized to perform well. I could see some other places that I couldn't see the energy, but in our case, we had a good tournament and we won again the third time in a row. We actually won the European Championship, and the boys, they just loved to play and they were super happy to compete again. So even if we had some struggles in the start with some injury situations, but it was a huge success to see that it was like a really new competition again.
Thanks. Thank you, Kåre. Another question coming in here, another one, maybe you can take this one, Clarissa, but about your governing bodies and the support, how was your support throughout this year? By the financial or just asking questions on how you are doing in this situation? How is that for you?
I think USA Wrestling has been very supportive of the coaches and athletes and staff, the people working at USA Wrestling since the whole thing. They continued to pay the athletes, and coaches through this whole time. even though we didn't have like a national team competition for the new year, they just kept that same national team and continue to pay and support. And we still do weekly Zoom meetings as a all staff with USA Wrestling. So big support on USA Wrestling's side, you know, and through every, like I said, in the US, we've gone through, or we're still, you know, Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ, you know, social issues, you know, that they are like having conversations on, you know, with athletes, with staff, with coaches. And so I think USA Wrestling has been supportive throughout this whole time.
I think that's an interesting one. We'd love to hear from you guys as well, John. Just, you know, from a rowing perspective as well here in the US, other NGBs. I think there's been it's been so complicated. Things have been moving in so many different directions that the effort from an NGB perspective has been just to trying to keep up. You know, keeping athlete and coach welfare at the center of the conversation, but how about for you guys? What's that been like in Norway, and how does that compare to some of your neighbours over there?
You want to share first a little bit, Kåre?
Yeah, can you repeat your question, Cam? I didn't get the.
What has the national governing body done to support for you guys, you know, in the pandemic in terms of finances, additional support that you typically would not have received from the federation prior to the pandemic?
We have the support from the Olympic Federation through the Norwegian Volleyball Federation has been the same, but the players, most of the income of the players is from playing tournaments. So, and they have some sponsorship, and all the sponsors they are with us. So, but the players have lost some of their income, and but that's the situation, and the government hasn't funded this yet. There is still a discussion with the Norwegian government in funding some of this. If you are an employee in something else, you can apply for some funding, but sportsmen are not in this situation in Norway.
And I think in general on the high performance, the support has been quite good, and the connections been quite good, and the Olympic system works. They have been, like Clarissa said, they've been hooking up through Zoom and other platforms. But I guess for me that also work with the lower levels, then you see a lot of the coaches being laid off, or and then the communication and the support, both for the coaches from the clubs and all the way through to the athletes, has been less as far as it goes out. Of course, different sports have different systems, but since the activity was shut down, then you saw that the coaches were laid off. But also some really good example of coaches being creative and keeping up with their, the clubs keeping them on, and they keeping doing great things, and keeping their athletes and the coaches being activized through the different digital channels. So it's and at the moment we're looking on how to share those best experience of that and trying to move forward. So it also creates a great opportunity for the future, trying to connect as well as we do now, also going into more being together live as well.
Yeah. The support question's a huge one. I got one last one, and Clarissa, I tried to warm you up on this one, but particularly here in the US, following the rules is a sort of conditional thing. If you want to follow them, you can, but if you don't want to, you don't have to. Do you want to just talk a little bit about the challenges there of we've all tried to put protocols in place, but how has that been for you from a coaching perspective of keeping that buy-in, keeping that motivation with your athletes and the broader community at large?
Right. Like, yeah, it's like we can't really make anyone do anything here, you know, like not everyone follows. We're kind of rule breakers in the US, I think. You know, like if it's like mandatory masks, you know, like people will push that line sometimes and they'll wear that mask around their ears, you know, but it's like we need to cover up. And so we need like to get unified here in the US and just kind of take this on all together. And it's a little challenge. That's probably one of the challenging things, I think, that, you know, if we're hosting events and trying to make sure that the number one priority is health and safety for everyone, you know, then I think everyone needs to do their part to adhere to those guidelines and rules, you know. So it's tough. If anyone has suggestions how we can all be on the same page in this country, that would be helpful.
Yes, that's a much larger question. We probably not only could fill an hour of a webinar on that one, we could do a whole series. How to help the US. So, how about from your side, John? You know, in terms of rule following, in terms of how we're moving forward, how do you guys foresee it? You know, with the 273 odd days to go, what do you and Kara see here as the you know the one thing to stay at the top of the list of priorities?
Well, Kåre will have to answer for the high performance part there. I'll leave it to you, Kåre. Well, what is the highest priority now in the preparations for Tokyo?
We start preparations as usual to prepare with physical training this October, November, December, and then we hope to travel somewhere, but we stay like we did this summer, 1 week off and 1 week on, and then we stay in a high performance school in Norway together with some other athletes and other coaching staff. So we are really good here, and our environment is really good for what we are doing to practice, and we really hope that we also can travel somewhere to compete with somebody. But we also, as soon as it's possible to invite somebody, we will do, but it's a bit on hold, and we have a plan B and C, and but I think there will be an Olympics, and we prepare for that. It's maybe a different Olympics with less spectators or more restriction in things, but we plan and we prepare for the Olympics, and keep calm and see what's happening, and enjoy life, and stay good together. That's our focus. So I'm positive and optimistic about also the situation in the world.
Well, what a way, JB. I don't know if I could hand it over to you in any other of a better piece of advice for all of us. Stay calm, keep it simple, and go from there. So, JB, final word over to you.
Yeah, no, really just to thank you all for participating. Thanks to Cora and Clarissa for those insights, and to Cam and John for organizing and moderating the situation. It's great to hear the creativity and the adaptability that these coaches have explained to us today. And I think on day-to-day coaching, things are often in a pretty regular form. Here, we've had to react to so much change that it's really great to hear some of those things that you've been able to put in place, and how you've reacted to that, and really focused on keeping the athletes motivated and helping them to perform. So thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. Everybody stay safe.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.